Welcome to this explainer. Sitting here at the Next Hub with my laptop open, I was just digging into these wild market numbers, and we really need to talk about that massive consumer tech price shock that hit all of us in June of 2026. It felt like it came totally out of nowhere, right? But the truth is, the warning signs were actually flashing red for months.
Hello guys, welcome to the Next Hub YouTube channel. If you enjoy fascinating facts, cutting-edge technology, and mind-blowing knowledge, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an update. Now, let's dive straight into today's video.
Okay, let's dive right into this. On June 25th, 2026, Apple did something completely unprecedented in their modern history. Now, usually, a mid-year price increase for a product that's already on the shelves, it just doesn't happen. The historical average is literally 0%. But suddenly, bam! The MacBook Air goes up by 18%, the iPad Pro by 20%, and the Apple TV spiked by a staggering 54%. This is a huge anomaly. A company that's famous for shielding us from supply chain drama just slammed on the brakes and hiked prices across the board.
And their excuse? It was incredibly revealing. Apple came right out and explicitly said, "We have never seen a component price increase this much this quickly." They directly blamed soaring memory chip prices driven by the AI boom. Let that sink in for a second. The AI trade isn't just some abstract Wall Street concept anymore. It is driving real, immediate inflation that is hitting you and me right in the wallet.
So to understand why your electronics just got so insanely expensive, we need to look behind the curtain at Section 1, the physical cost of AI inside data centers. We really need to shift our focus away from the magic of software answering questions on our screens and look at the concrete, physical reality of what artificial intelligence actually is. Because when you type a prompt into ChatGPT, your phone isn't the thing doing the thinking. Your phone is basically just a piece of glass with a Wi-Fi connection. The actual thinking happens in a data center. Picture a massive, highly expensive, incredibly power-hungry industrial warehouse just stuffed with metal racks of chips. A single building can hold 100,000 NVIDIA GPUs. So when you factor in the chips, the insane amount of power, the cooling systems, the concrete, the whole shebang, a single large AI data center costs anywhere from $10 to $25 billion to build. And the crazy thing is, they are building these everywhere at absolutely breakneck speed. Why? Well, because of this terrifying number right here, 221 zettabytes. By 2026, the world is projected to generate this mind-boggling amount of data. To put that into perspective for you, that is over 100 times more data than the entire world produced back in 2010. We're literally producing more data in a single month right now than all of human history did up until a decade ago. This absolute explosion in data requires an absolute explosion in spending just to keep up. Back in 2020, right before the AI boom really caught fire, big tech companies spent a combined $90 billion on capital expenditures. By 2026, Amazon, Meta, Google, and Microsoft ramped that up to $725 billion. That is an eightfold increase in just 6 years, entirely dedicated to building out physical AI infrastructure. Now, these numbers are so astronomically large that they kind of start to lose their meaning, don't they? So let's bring it back down to earth with a grounded, everyday business analogy to help us wrap our heads around this giant macroeconomic puzzle. Let's call it the $10 million coffee factory analogy. Imagine you spend $10 million to build a gorgeous, state-of-the-art factory to manufacture coffee machines. But after a full year of running the place, your massive factory only sells $400,000 worth of product. So, I want you to actively think about this. Is that business math good, bad, or terrible? Well, it's terrible, right? You would absolutely never build a second factory if the first one was bleeding money like that. But here's the kicker. This terrible business math perfectly mirrors the current AI industry. Which brings us directly to the central mystery of this explainer in Section 2, the $600 billion gap, also known as the AI revenue deficit. There is a massive, gaping mathematical hole sitting right at the very heart of the tech economy. Here is the crucial breakdown. Analysts at JP Morgan crunched the numbers and found that for these AI giants to justify their massive spending, assuming just a bare minimum 10% return for their investors, the AI industry needs to bring in about $650 billion every single year. But how much are they actually earning? When you combine OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, and all the rest, they are pulling in roughly $75 billion. Meanwhile, as we saw, the spending sits at $725 billion. That means for every single dollar the AI industry earns, tech giants are spending 9 to 10 times more.
Insiders are calling this the $600 billion revenue deficit. Now, the only reason investors tolerated this massive deficit was based on one core assumption, that everyday businesses and massive enterprises would eventually pay infinite money for AI tools because it would make them so much more efficient. But as we'll see in Section 3, the failing enterprise ROI and asking if AI is worth the cost, that core assumption is really starting to fracture. The enterprise return on investment, or ROI, is frankly failing. Just look at these stark statistics. McKinsey is reporting that 73% of enterprise AI deployments are failing to achieve their projected ROI. BCG notes that a measly 5% of companies are actually seeing substantial returns. And MIT? They found a staggering 95% failure rate in achieving measurable financial returns. Companies simply aren't getting what they paid for. Startups are ditching the expensive models, and major players like Uber have actually admitted to blowing through their entire annual AI budget in just 4 months.
And this backlash, it's reaching the very highest levels. Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, which is one of the largest enterprise software companies on the planet, went on TV and explicitly said, "I am paying for tokens that create no value. They're creating a wealth tax." I think that beautifully captures how even the biggest software giants are rebelling. They are feeling like AI models have been completely and irresponsibly oversold.
So what's really fascinating is how this massive macroeconomic math connects directly back to you and me. Remember those memory chips we talked about at the very beginning? Well, manufacturers like Samsung and Micron had a choice. Sell standard memory to companies like Apple for your everyday laptop, or sell incredibly expensive, high-bandwidth memory to these giant AI data centers. Because capital always flows to the highest bidder, they shifted a whopping 93% of their production to AI memory, totally abandoning standard consumer tech.
And the result? A massive, crippling supply shortage for regular electronics. In just 6 months, the cost of 1 gigabyte of standard PC memory skyrocketed from 43 cents to $2.39. That is a 5.5 times price increase. This right here is the hidden AI tax. This is exactly what forced Apple to suddenly hike the price of your electronics right in the middle of the year.
So if enterprises are rebelling, and costs are totally out of control, and there's a $600 billion revenue gap, why on earth are Amazon, Google, Meta, and Microsoft still spending billions? Well, to answer that, we turn to Section 4, the history of the capital cycle, and the history of bubbles. This economic cycle explains almost every single industrial bubble in human history, and it breaks down into 4 simple steps. Step 1, an exciting new technology promises sky-high returns, which attracts vast amounts of capital. Step 2, capital keeps flowing blindly until massive overcapacity is built. Step 3, the utter lack of actual revenue to justify all that building causes a market collapse. And finally, Step 4, the companies that actually survive the crash buy up all the wreckage for pennies, wait for the demand to eventually catch up, and make an absolute fortune. We have actually seen this exact playbook before. Let's draw a direct historical parallel to the late 1990s telecom bubble. Back then, everyone believed internet bandwidth demand would just grow infinitely. In the late 90s, telecom companies poured $500 billion into laying fiber optic cables across the country, assuming internet traffic was going to double every few months. You had companies with absolutely zero revenue going public with multi-billion-dollar valuations, and then the crash hit, wiping out $2 trillion of market value. The reason for the crash? The demand was real, but it wasn't growing anywhere near fast enough to justify the spending. When that bubble finally burst in the early 2000s, I want you to guess how much of that incredibly expensive fiber optic cable was actually being used. Just 2.7%. Over 95% of those cables just sat unused underground. But, those cables didn't vanish. They eventually became the physical backbone that made modern giants like YouTube and Netflix possible years later. The technology was real, but the bubble absolutely still burst. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5. Will the bubble burst? Weighing the evidence. This is the ultimate question we really have to weigh objectively today. Well, a crash isn't 100% certainty, and here's why. Unlike the dot-com era startups that were funded almost entirely by debt with zero actual profits, today's AI spenders are completely different beasts. Companies like Nvidia, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon are insanely profitable, cash-rich giants. They actually have the balance sheets to absorb incredible amounts of pain without immediately declaring bankruptcy.
So realistically, we are looking at 2 potential paths forward. Path 1,
the bubble pops. The spending halts, the tech market crashes, and thousands of IT jobs just vanish overnight as the whole industry resets. Path 2, the tech giants race to turn a profit by raising prices across the board. If this happens, the incredibly cheap AI tools we rely on today shoot up in price, becoming an expensive luxury that only massive corporations can actually afford to run.
Either way, the math simply has to balance eventually. You cannot spend $725 billion to make $75 billion forever. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. When you look at that $600 billion deficit, the incredible technological breakthroughs, and the very real inflation hitting our devices right now, is this really just a bubble destined to pop? Or are we simply witnessing the greatest, most expensive bet humanity has ever taken to build the future? That is all for this explainer. Keep analyzing the market, and I'll catch you next time.